Brazilians celebrate their team's victory against Croatia as the World Cup kicks off. But not everyone was in the mood to celebrate. People across the country demonstrated against the football tournament, angry at the corruption scandals surrounding the sport's governing body, FIFA. Brazil, the World Cup and FIFA. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. The world's biggest sporting event kicked off in Brazil on Thursday, and the host nation didn't disappoint, winning the opening match 3-1 against Croatia. But not everyone in Brazil is celebrating. Anti-World Cup protests took place in at least 10 cities. The demonstrators are angry at the corruption, police brutality and high cost of the stadiums. Gabriel Elizondo has more from Sao Paulo.
The craziness started early, hours before kickoff, fans arriving at the stadium in Sao Paulo. 7 years after being awarded the world's largest sporting spectacle, finally, the first answer to the question, would Brazil be ready? Early indications outside the stadium were positive. But hours before kickoff, several kilometers away from the stadium, fewer than 100 anti-World Cup protesters trying to block the road to the stadium were dispersed by riot police. They say the World Cup spending by Brazil is unjust.
The World Cup is a big part of the social injustices that Brazil still faces today. We're fighting against this unfair event that doesn't benefit the people, but only a few.
In Rio, similar ugly scenes repeated themselves, but there too, the protests involved only a few hundred people. Despite the shocking images, they don't tell the story of the day, as the brief and small clashes provided no major disruptions. Closer to game time, and like Brazilians all over the country, people in this Rio community began to gather for the feverish party in celebration of the Seleção Brasileira, as the national team is called here. Back at the site of the opening game, a wave of yellow. The tournament kicked off with a spectacular opening act with international celebrities, while dignitaries and fans watched on. By nightfall, under the bright lights, the hosts proved why they are the favorites, working out their early jitters before settling down to business. Gabriel Elizondo, Al Jazeera, Sao Paulo.
Well, a lot to discuss, so let's bring in our guests. In Sao Paulo, Maurizio Savarese, correspondent for football magazine 442. In Washington, D.C., Paulo Sotero, director of the Brazil Institute at Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. And in Johannesburg, Jonty Mark, he's a football journalist. Welcome to you all. Let's begin in Sao Paulo with Maurizio Savarese. Celebration, no doubt, among many with Brazil's victory. But is this enough to dampen the anger among others within the country who've been protesting and striking?
I would say there is anger about the spend of the World Cup and how things were done in the beginning. But the protests are definitely much smaller than people expected in the beginning. Of course, we cannot count on Facebook pages to create our expectations, but they said it would be about 10,000 people in this protest yesterday in Sao Paulo for the World Cup opener, and there were just about 100 people. So I would say that massively Brazilians might have criticism about the World Cup, but they have embraced the event, and that was very clear in the first day.
Well, Paulo Sotero, your view, once it's got underway, do you think that people are going to be getting behind the tournament?
Oh, behind the Brazilian team, you know, I think this is a dream for us to host the World Cup for the first time after 64 years. In 1950, as we all know, Brazil lost in the final in Rio. So we have always expected to have this opportunity. But as Mauricio mentioned, you know, there is a discontent in Brazil with the way this thing was prepared. I think the people that are demonstrating demonstrating in the street, although it's a minority of people, they express a feeling that exists in Brazil. But we are very capable in Brazil of separating our political opinions about things, including this preparation of the World Cup that we think was kind of badly done, with our love for soccer, with our love for our national team, and we will be doing both. You know, we'll be expressing our doubts about the preparations and our immense love for the Brazilian team.
Well, John T. Mark, South Africa 4 years ago, there was also labour action then at the beginning of the tournament, not on as great a scale, but certainly that did appear to dissipate as the process went along, people in the end coming right behind the tournament throughout the country.
Yes, I mean, certainly the labour action wasn't nearly as significant as that in Brazil and around the World Cup, and I think that's partly because the Brazil spend on the World Cup has been quite exorbitant in comparison with South Africa. I think South Africa did probably a better job in terms of financing it and in terms of structuring the finance. But obviously there are similar problems here too in Brazil, and certainly there were some protests. But yes, it did get better, and the whole of Africa and South Africa in particular certainly embraced the World Cup here.
Well, Paulo Sotero, I just want to step back a bit. I mean, Brazil was awarded the right to host the World Cup in 2007. The country was in an economic boom at that particular time. Now, of course, 7 years later, circumstances have changed. Just a warning in terms of awarding the process so much early, is it not?
Yeah, you know, as you mentioned, Brazil was in booming economy at that time. Not so much right now. People are expressing frustration, as I said, with the way this was organized. I think there were too many promises of things that were going to be ready now in terms of transit systems and other public goods. They are behind. Those delays are symptoms of many things that are behind in Brazil in terms of renovating, modernizing the country's infrastructure. Yes, this was a consequence of over-promising, under-delivering, but the World Cup is on. I agree that, you know, as the tournament progresses, I think you will see probably less protests, although there will be protests in most cities. It will also depend on how the team perform, how the Brazilian team does. If we God forbid that we were to be taken out very soon against Holland or Spain, for instance, I think you would have one scenario where pessimism, negativism would be more prevalent. If Brazil continues to move forward, I think you have a better climate.
Well, Maurizio, I see you nodding in agreement with that last point in particular.
Well, I would just jump in. I don't know if the other panelists agree with me, but Brazilians tend to be very bipolar about these important things that happen to the country. So I would say that at this moment, Brazilians feel as if they weren't ready to host the Angolan Rugby Championship, and in the end of the World Cup, they might feel ready to host the Winter Olympics. Brazilian sentiment is very volatile, and I would say that until the World Cup ends, and until a few months afterwards, we're going to try to grasp how Brazilians actually feel about things, and probably that's going to coincide with the general elections in October as well.
Well, John T. Mark, you mentioned that part of the problem may be down to the fact of the massive spend in Brazil as compared to the tournament in South Africa. What kind of legacy is there in South Africa 4 years later, another tournament beginning, one we're looking back on? Has there been something tangible left behind apart from the pride of staging the tournament?
You know what? I'm not sure there has. You know, I think that the legacy is overplayed. I mean, FIFA there is a World Cup legacy trust where FIFA have given several $1 million to South Africa to use for their football development. So far, I mean, we're not going to see the signs of that for a few years to come, I don't think. South Africa have obviously failed to qualify for Brazil. The national team is not doing so well. So in terms of legacy, there are some very good stadiums that were built, but also there's problems there because they're not able to fill them. Certainly stadiums like the one in Nelspruit, like the one in Cape Town, they have problems now funding them, having built them. And there was debate over whether they should have built them in the first place when there was an existing stadium in Cape Town and an existing stadium in Durban.
Well, on that particular point, John T. Mark, I just want to pick up on that particular point that you're making there. That stadium in Cape Town, for example, now that was at the express instruction of FIFA. Yeah. They absolutely insisted that they needed a stadium at that particular site to have a background for, basically, so it looked good. FIFA does have immense control over what they demand of host nations, does it not?
It does, it does. I mean, basically, the word host is very appropriate. It's a FIFA tournament which happens to be hosted in that country, and FIFA does have a lot of control over, yes, what stadia, where it wants the stadia. I mean, it specifies, I think, you have to have at least 8 venues. You know, I hear what you're saying about FIFA instructing that. My understanding was Danny Jordan saying they wanted soccer-specific stadiums because the existing infrastructure, both in Durban and in Cape Town, was a rugby-based infrastructure. So they wanted stadia specifically around soccer. The problem there obviously lies in the fact that if a soccer team, for example, Ajax Cape Town in Cape Town or Santos in Cape Town, cannot fill up the stadium, it becomes a bit of a white elephant. It can then get used for, you know, your rock concerts and this and that, but that's sporadic and is not going to keep the economy of the stadium running.
Yeah, well, Paulo Sotero, I mean, you mentioned we are mentioning the demands that have been made by FIFA. Obviously, the stadiums, $11.7 billion invested by the Brazilian government, $4 billion for 12 stadiums alone, 3 times over budget. So, of course, there has been mismanagement involved here too, has there not?
I don't know if it mismanaged, but resources misplaced. For instance, this debate in Brazil about the stadiums. There are 3 cities where we built or renovated stadiums. Manaus in the Amazon, the capital city of Brazil, and the city of Natal in the northeast, where what happens is that there is not enough soccer there to attract huge crowds. For the local leagues have never gotten more than 6,000–7,000 people for a game. So there is this discussion that, well, this after being used for 3 or 4 games during the World Cup, these will be turning to become white elephants, and so did we need this? At the same time, to have a World Cup in Brazil and not have games played in the heart of the Amazon region would be kind of weird. So difficult, but again, the impact, the economic impact of those things, you know, they are minor. Brazil is a $2.7 trillion economy. It's not the World Cup that is going to make it, you know, become much better. You know, now we lost the narrative, the positive narrative that could have been built around the World Cup has been lost, but not now. It was lost 3–4 years ago when we started delaying things.
Yes, well, Maurizio Savarese, to what extent
May I jump in?
Yes, please, sir. Say, what were you going to say?
I was just going to mention to add to Paulo's commentary that the decision to make 12 stadiums was basically by the Brazilian government. In my book, A to Zico, we discussed that as well. In 2009, when the bidding process was going along, Brazil could have chosen 8, Brazil could have chosen 10, but because of political leaders, regional political leaders, Brazil decided to have 12, and some of these host cities, they're not necessarily a problem like Manaus in itself, but the problem is that they are taking the place of other cities which have a bigger footballing culture, such as Belém, which is not very far from it, or Florianopolis, in the case losing the host to Curitiba. These cases were very much debatable, and what Brazil did in the end was to find a political framework to put all these 12 cities in the World Cup to host it as well.
Well, let's just pause at the particular moment, because it's not just the World Cup in Brazil that has come under critical scrutiny. Allegations of bribery, corruption and worker abuse have plagued Qatar, host of the 2022 World Cup. Match fixing in South Africa in the months before the 2010 World Cup tarnished what was otherwise considered a success. The common thread behind all these accusations is FIFA, international football's governing body, and at its helm, Sepp Blatter. He's been president since 1998, and despite accusations of mismanagement, nepotism and corruption during his 4 terms in office, he's just announced his intention to stand in the next FIFA election. The decision to stand for another term has angered many inside FIFA's Congress. The president of the Dutch Football Association had this to say.
I think FIFA will come to a standstill, because I also told him, and that is my true opinion, that people don't really take him serious anymore. Because now a few months ago he all of a sudden said the voting for Qatar was a mistake. That means that he blames all the others. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, he linked racism to the vote. How can you do that? I mean, there are other examples of things he said that I wouldn't have said if I was him, and that people don't expect from the FIFA president to say.
Well, Maurizio Savarese, to what extent are people in Brazil angered at FIFA as opposed to being angered at the government?
To be very honest, my impression is that people aim at FIFA to hit the government most often. But we should always remember that FIFA has troubles with their World Cup venues and with their World Cup hosts. Not since now. They have it since 2006, when South Africa was supposed to host the World Cup, and Germany got it instead after a very mysterious decision by a New Zealander who just left the reunion, which was deciding on the host for reasons no one knows until now. That's how they decided to start a rotating system, which sent the World Cup to Brazil, Russia, and Qatar. I would say FIFA has loads of troubles all around the world, but in Brazil, although people have this issue with FIFA being very active in their decisions of how you do things and FIFA standards, people are actually aiming at FIFA to hit the federal government. That's my impression.
Well, Jonty Mark, have we heard a reference there to the issue of 2006, for example, allegations of corruption within the process are nothing new. It has happened before. We are hearing it now again with relation to Russia and indeed to Qatar. But within South Africa itself as well, the allegations of match fixing before the 2010 World Tournament, for example. Is there a view that FIFA has not done a job in terms of getting to the bottom of these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair comment. Certainly there have been corruption allegations surrounding FIFA for some time now, a long time before these World Cup 2022 allegations came out. I think that, you know, there is a dark cloud hanging over FIFA, and they don't do enough. There was a report on this match fixing. It came out. The report was made that the 3 games, I think, before the World Cup were fixed by Wilson Raj Perumal. And, you know, I don't think FIFA have really done enough to go into it, and I don't think the association here have really done enough to look into how this happened, and I don't think the figures that made this happen have been sufficiently punished. And there is a sense, really, I think that FIFA kind of are a law unto their own, and they kind of do whatever they want, and they're above the law in a sense. I mean, here we had in South Africa, of course, we had the FIFA World Cup court, where you could literally be arrested for a robbery on a Tuesday, in court on a Wednesday, and in prison on a Thursday, which is probably the fastest jurisdictional process in South Africa that's ever happened in terms of the fact that, I mean, and it was pretty ludicrous that they can come in to the country and they can basically do whatever they want. It doesn't make any sense in many ways.
Well, it was certainly quicker justice than FIFA appears to have been meting out. But Paulo Sotero, that whole issue, I mean, FIFA does have a responsibility, does it not? Not just to the host nations, such as in Brazil, as this particular case, but to a world of football followers.
Yes, they do, but they are unaccountable. This is a very strange institution, and Brazilians are very aware of it. Before Blatter, there was João Avelange, who was FIFA's boss for many decades, I believe. Brazilian soccer bosses are very influential in this game. They are powerful in Brazil because they command huge crowds, huge budgets, and this is something that we absolutely love, soccer, so football. And so there is, you know, I think this antagonism vis-a-vis FIFA. For instance, even President Rousseff at some point in the past few weeks did an interview with sports journalists and said, you know, FIFA is too heavy. For instance, they imposed on Brazil that the law would temporarily be lifted, a law that in Brazil forbids the sale of alcoholic beverage, especially beer, in stadiums for very good reasons. But since Budweiser is one of the sponsors of the tournament, they imposed this on Brazil, and we know the government of Brazil is always proud of talking about our national sovereignty, but there's no national sovereignty in this case. There is also the context. In Brazil, we have been fighting a lot against corruption in politics. There have been trials of politicians in Brazil, and I think the context is such that makes Brazilians very sensitive to this, you know, this heavy-handed of FIFA that is not seen as an honest organization after all.
Maurizio Savarese, I mean, that's a very important point, is it not? The reaction of the people seeing an organization that is certainly not blameless, telling a country what it needs to do, that it cannot drink alcohol other than the sponsored one in a stadium.
I agree with that, but one thing that Brazilians have to do, and I suppose all the other football associations all around the world have to do it as well, is to do their homework. And when I mean do their homework, is to go after the corrupt officials they have in their own countries, because these are the people who actually make FIFA. FIFA is not only a mysterious organization based in Switzerland near a beautiful lake. It is an entity made by people who come from the national associations, and these people are actually the ones who get involved in World Cup votes, in the FIFA standards. All these decisions are basically made by people that not only Brazilians invented, but also Mexicans, English, Russians. We have all invented these people. So we have to tackle corruption in football at our homes first, and then see what we can do about FIFA. I think FIFA deserves reform. It should be important in governing the sport. But we have to do our homework first, and to tell FIFA what to do, we have to be sure that people like Ricardo Teixeira, who was involved in loads of corruption allegations, and people like João Avelange, or even Sepp Blatter, who has been involved in some of them himself, although not proved. We have to assure these people don't get to FIFA. That's my point.
Well, John T. Mark, that's a very interesting point, saying that actually there has an accountability too. FIFA is the sum of its parts. At a global organization, its parts must start making changes, not just its leadership. Would you agree?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, its parts must also make changes, but I mean, it must be difficult if a part, for example, wants to break away from FIFA, maybe wants to say, okay, this organization is corrupt, this organization isn't working for us, we want to create our own organization. I mean, that is surely going to be an extremely difficult process. But you know, and you can say that all over the FIFA regions there are allegations of corruption. So certainly not just with the central FIFA figures like Sepp Blatter. You know, it's all around. You've already had Jack Warner suspended recently, the head of CONCACAF. I mean, all over the place there are these allegations, and I think my feeling is that FIFA don't do enough about it. They're not accountable for it. You know, even this situation currently with these Sunday Times allegations in England about Qatar. You know, you have Blatter holding a press conference where he starts accusing the English media of being racist in some way towards him or towards who, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a bizarre comment to make, and he's making an increasing amount of these bizarre comments. So I feel like there needs to be some kind of change. How it happens, I'm not 100% sure, I have to be honest, but there does definitely something needs to happen within the top of footballing structures, because it's not working as it is at the moment. They've got a captive market. Everybody loves football, or like football has a captive market because people will always watch it. But you can't take liberties with that, and I think that's what FIFA have done.
Well, FIFA does have an ethics committee. It does have an American-based lawyer who's looking at the allegations concerning the most recent bid. That we still remain to see what happens. But Paulo Sotero, I saw you nodding there in relation to the question about cleaning up. There has to be a cleanup. It has to start.
And the cleanup, as Mauricio mentioned, the cleanup has to start at the level of the most national federations of football. You know, in Brazil, in England, in other countries that are more open systems, in Italy, in Spain, in Mexico, where you can voice your discontent and you can protest. So it's really up to the people, up to politicians in Brazil, the the clean part of it, to make their voices heard and start putting pressure, because FIFA exists in a sort of limbo. FIFA is not accountable. It's not part of anything. It's not part of the UN. It's not part of anything.
But it is indeed part of the global community. At that particular point, my thanks to our guests, Maurizio Savarese, Paulo Sotero, and Jonty Mark. And just a reminder of what the World Cup should be all about: the beauty, the passion, and the sheer joy of a game that once every 4 years brings all around the globe a little bit closer to each other. And do add your voice to this discussion. You can find us at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or go to @AJ Inside Story on Twitter. I'm Mike Hanna. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.